This conference will now be recorded.
So I want to welcome you to the ICA Brown Bag webinars. Today, we're going to be going over professional development groups, Adlerian style. Um, this is something that I've done for probably 5 or 6 years. I really like running group counseling and particularly professional groups. And by professional, I'm not talking outside of the human services. I'm talking about professional groups among mental health professionals, and then also professional groups with students. And I'll try to make sure that I can make the distinction between somebody who's already a counseling professional and a student to kind of help you conceptualize how we're doing this. But my name is Dr. Wayman, and I'm the executive director of the Indiana Counseling Association. I also am a full-time employee of Capella University, which is an online CACREP mental health counseling program. And I just wanted to welcome you. So thank you for coming. And like I said earlier, this is being recorded. And you feel free to turn on your microphone if you want to say something or put it in the chat box. I can see the chat box. And so if you type something in there, I'll read it and that way then everybody knows for sure what was said. But let me get to the first slide here. Well, I guess the second slide because we're on the first one. And this is Alfred Adler. He had quite a sense of humor. And if you remember, one of the ideas behind his theory was the idea of imperfection. People are striving for superiority because of inferior feelings that they've had since they were young. And these inferior feelings came about because when we're born, we're totally dependent upon the adults, our environment to provide for us. And so he theorized that at an early age, we learned that we need to have other people take care of us and then need to be social as well. And so he joined those concepts together and came up with the idea of superiority complex and inferiority complex. And you'll see that that's common in our society. People talk about that. And so he says, and this is kind of a humorous statement, and he says, I am imperfect and I will accept you and your imperfection. And so he says, people striving to be perfect, it just doesn't work. And so we just need to learn to accept each other. And then he had another humorous statement here, which he says, the only normal people are the ones you don't know very well. And and I think that's true. We idolize people and then we kind of get to know them. We're like, they're just like me. They've got their mistakes, they've got their imperfections as well. And so these are kind of some of the things that we want to instill in these professional development groups, these ideas of it's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to be normal, which is an imperfect person. And so it takes you to the idea of the goal of professional development groups. And here's what the goal is. The goal of professional development groups are to overcome difficulties. And by overcoming difficulties, that leads to courage, self-respect, and knowing yourself. And that's a really important goal for professional development groups. Now, this works not only in people who are already active in the mental health field, but for students who are learning the field. And so we need to have people to exhibit courage in their life. Courage is doing something that you know is right, even sometimes when other people may disagree with you. Doesn't mean that you're fearless, because you are fearful sometimes when you do things that require courage. But courage is, just doing the right thing. And then self-respect, being able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, you're doing all right. Even though you've got some mistakes and some imperfections, you're doing all right. And then thirdly, knowing yourself, because what I've found is a great counselor knows her or his clients. I mean, a good counselor knows her or his clients, but a great counselor knows himself. And that's something that we need to instill in students who are learning counseling and also in mental health professionals right now who are active in the field, who are working. And so we want them to know themselves. And so that's really the goals of professional development groups, is getting people to really know themselves. And when you know yourself and you're free to be yourself and you respect yourself and you're a courageous person, you're going to be a good counselor. And so that's the goals of this group, is to get people to understand this concept. And also it takes a lot of pressure off, because then they don't have to be perfect. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so here's Adlerian group structure. Oh, okay. How do you recommend we know ourselves or to be a great counselor is one of the questions. Well, one of the ways to get to know yourself is in community, is what Adler says. And the more you socialize with people, the more you invest in people and in your community, the more you understand where you fit in your community. And also you get feedback from others about you. And so you can kind of understand, how do others view you? And how does that fit into how I know myself? So knowing myself then is not only my perspective, but it's others' perspective, societal's perspective about me. And so that's how you get to be a great counselor, is knowing yourself. And so that's the primary objective of these types of groups, the Adlerian professional development groups. And so what's interesting, Adler believed that we are equal. And so he believed in a democracy, that hierarchies are not really helpful. And so the first thing you want to do when you have when you're setting up an Adlerian group, is you want to establish an agreement. And this agreement is agreement that all parties in the group um, agree to, believe in, and I'll share with you a little bit in a little bit what type of things you want to look for. But you want to make sure that everybody's voice is heard, and that there's just kind of a general agreement about how this group is going to go. Another thing that you want to do is recognize the purpose and patterns of group members. In other words, their lifestyle is what Adler calls that. And so everybody kind of has patterns of behavior, because Adler believed all behavior was purposeful. And so that there's no such thing as a behavior that didn't have a direction or a purpose. And so we try to recognize these patterns of behavior. We try to recognize people's purpose, as people have different purposes, and try in an Adlerian group structure, then we try to meld these purposes together to kind of create our own community within that group counseling session. The third one is recognizing family constellation. And if you remember, the family constellation is a big thing in Adler. He was the first one who came up with the idea of birth order. How most of our presidents in the United States are firstborn or only born. And then the second child that comes along is in competition with the first child. And so the second child is often different from the first child. And then there's other children in between. And then the final child, the youngest child, is the one who gets most of the attention. And so to recognize this family constellation, getting people to understand how they fit in their family and how that may be carrying over into their present lifestyle, how they get along with people. Hi, is there somebody else just joined us?
Yeah, this is Tom.
Good. Can you see the screen?
Well, no, I'm having problems. They did something with my laptop at work,
Okay.
and so I'm on phone right now. So
Okay.
I'm working on the other.
Okay. We're recording this, so I just want you to know that. So okay, we're in Adlerian group structure right now, and so the fourth thing is life tasks, and life tasks are things like finding meaningful relationships, finding meaningful work, your philosophy of life, those kinds of things. There's some existential quality to it too that Adler has, finding meaning and purpose. So these type of life tasks are things that we're looking for in the group structure too. And then early recollection. of course, is one of the things that we do in Adlerian theory, is have people recall early memories and help them to see how that early memory may be still affecting the way they are as adults, and for good and bad. Not all early recollections mean that we are in a bad pattern. It could set us off in a good pattern too. And then we have reorientation and re-education. So a person realizes then in the group, so that's why this keeps happening to me. And so, because the group gives them feedback about how things are going, and so the person kind of reorients their thinking, and then the group re-educates that person about, what would make that person to fit in better, why they keep having trouble with certain clients, or why they keep having trouble with certain people in society, those kinds of things. So the reorientation there might uncover maybe countertransference. And then the group problem solving. The group help each other to solve each other's problems, and then it generates new possibilities, support, and encouragement. And it's really a pretty cool group structure, and it's fairly unique because of Adlerian's theory. Any questions or comments about the Adlerian group structure?
No.
Okay, I'm just waiting to see if somebody else typed anything in, and nobody has. Okay, let's go to the next page then. Okay, also, what's important to note when you're doing group counseling, Yalom is kind of the guru of group counseling, and he's an existentialist, and Adlerian is an existentialist, get along very well. Um, he came up with 11 therapeutic factors that go on in group, and that these are really important for group members to have these experiences in group. And so the first one is instilling hope that change is actually possible, that I don't have to continue to live the way that I've been living, and I am in charge of the way that I treat others. And so it is possible for me to change some of these patterns that maybe I've picked up. Also, another one is universality, the idea that I'm not alone in my problems. I'm not alone in the way that I orient myself to life, and other people are similar to me. And by doing that, then they kind of pick up this universality, this commonality, and it provides comfort, and it also provides the idea of that, oh, you're going through this too, and how are you coping with this? And so it's going to help me cope with that too. And then, of course, there's imparting information. There's didactic instruction, direct advice sometimes that we give as counselors to our groups, but also group members can do that to each other as well, like somebody who maybe is an expert at something in that group. Gwen, glad to see you here. We are on page 5, and this is being recorded, Gwen, so you can pick it up later. I'll send everybody a PowerPoint of this, and also the recording on YouTube, so you can pick it up later. No problem, Gwen. No problem being late, not a big deal. Okay, the fourth factor is altruism. And this is super important because, if you as a group leader, well, let me back it up a little bit. Yalom says that the group leader's connection with each group member is not what changes people in group counseling. So it's not your connection with each person in the group. It's rather, so like, let me back that up to see a little bit further. In individual counseling, we've learned that the therapeutic relationship is what's healing for the client. The better connected they feel to the counselor, the more likely they are to get better. I mean, we know that from meta studies. Well, in group counseling, you transfer that from the counselor to the group. So the group itself has to have a connection with themselves, with each other. You are more of a facilitator as a group counselor. You're not the change agent. the group members are the change agents. And so altruism is a very important concept there. And so let's say that someone is going through an experience, and I, as a group counselor, as a group leader, I can connect with them and I can try to understand them and say, I really want to help you with this and help you through this process. Well, that's okay. Group members will accept that okay. But what's more meaningful is when group members do that with each other. And why is that more meaningful? Anybody got an idea? You can either type it in or turn on your microphone and talk. Why is that more meaningful for group members to be altruistic with each other than the group leader to be altruistic with the group members? It's not a trick question. It's a simple answer. Yeah, the bonding, good. Yeah, okay, the power of going through the healing process together better serves the group as a whole. Yes. Well, Yalom found if the group leader, is trying to be altruistic, the group members can kind of pass that off. Well, they're just doing their job. They're the leader. They're getting paid for this or whatever, and so they're just doing it because they're supposed to. But if you have a group member who is helping another group member, that really turns altruism on its head. Just like, why are they helping me? Why are they concerned about me? And so it really makes the power, the bonding, like what Karen says, and the healing process, like what Gwen is saying, it makes it stronger because you have real people helping real people, not the group leader helping the people in the group. So that's really an important concept. Altruism needs to be there for, according to Yalom, for things to get better in the group. Now, fifth one is the corrective recapitulation of the family. That's a fancy word of just saying there are people in the group that will remind them of their family. And that's something that they need to understand as group members in these professional development groups. How does so-and-so who's in this group remind me of my mother or my father or my brother or something? And they will repeat those behaviors that they have with their family members within the group. And so there's kind of some transference going on there, and they will repeat dysfunctional family relationships. But the correction of the group itself, like we talked about in a previous one, reorientation, reeducation, it will correct these dysfunctions. And so people then will take that outside the group and go correct it in their dysfunctional family relationships. So and this work is very powerful with Adlerian theory because of Adler's concept about birth order and trying to understand how families get along with each other. So that's 5 of the therapeutic factors. Let's get to the last 6 here. Another one is developing socializing techniques. And group sometimes just provides basic social skills. Like I was in one group, leading this group, and it was like 10 females and 2 males. And one of the males said, I keep having trouble getting a second date. I can get a first date, that's not a trouble, but I can't get second dates. I can't figure out what's going on. And so some of the females in the group gave him feedback about some of the things that kind of turned them off about his behavior. And so then he incorporated this feedback and then tried it out on a date and then reported back to the group about how that went. And then they gave him feedback. And so that's a very powerful therapeutic factor in the sense that it helps the group members to socialize and to increase their social ability. But also, along with that, they learn to imitate each other then too. So let's say, for example, it didn't happen in this group, but say, for example, in this group, the other male in this group is like, yeah, I'm able to get to second and third, maybe fourth dates, and this is what I do. I used to be in your shoes. I couldn't get the second dates. And so the one guy would be like, so how did you do that? And what did you do? And then he imitates the behavior of that other male, and that helps him to learn new behavior. And then another therapeutic factor is interpersonal learning, where we correct emotional experiences. So um, people share their emotional experiences and then get feedback from others about these emotional experiences. And then group cohesiveness, which is exactly what Glenn was talking about, the healing process together. Group cohesiveness brings along this idea that we are a group together and we're getting through this together and we're going to experience this together and we're all going to grow together. See, now we're talking about professional development groups. We're talking about two types of groups. We're talking about professionals that are already in the mental health counseling field who are wanting to learn themselves better, and also by doing that, they will know their clients better. But we're also talking about students who are learning the mental health counseling field, and so they're in this group, in this session together, trying to understand, move forward in that goal. So another one is catharsis. Group counseling allows a person to just get things off their chest. And then, of course, the last one, since Yalom's an existentialist, and this goes right along with Adlerian theory, is that people need to learn to take responsibility for themselves, for their life and death issues, those kinds of things. So Yalom's therapeutic factors, these have been proven over and over. Yalom's the guru of the group counseling, and it just fits so very well with Adlerian theory. So getting back to the Adlerian group structure, the first one was establish an agreement. And so here's what you do when you establish an agreement. You want to make sure that right off the bat, you make this statement that no one in here is better than anybody else. We're doing this together. Let's come up with some guidelines about how we want to function as a group. And it's really not preferred in Adlerian theory that you set those guidelines. It's preferred that they set these guidelines, they own these guidelines, and that they are the ones who see that they are in control of this group. So equality. And so in an Adlerian group, the Adlerian leader or the co-leaders may share a fair amount of personal information. So, but only if it moves the group forward, because they're not there to get their own counseling, but they're there to facilitate. The next one is safety. So you want to talk about what kind of things do we need to have safety in this group. Not only emotional safety, but we're talking also about physical safety as well. So if somebody has to leave to go to the bathroom or something, how do we know they're just going to the bathroom? They're not going there to because they're upset about something happened in the group. And so you kind of make these agreements. If somebody's gone for more than 5 minutes, somebody will go check on them. I did have one group where a person was feeling lightheaded, and they said, "I'm just going to the bathroom real quick. I'll be right back." And they passed out in the bathroom. They had low blood sugar and they had passed out. And so a person came and checked on them after the 5 minutes and made sure that they were okay. And the person was passed out, and we called the ambulance to make sure the person was okay. So safety is really important, not only emotional safety, but physical safety. Another one is to make sure that this agreement is modifiable. So at the beginning of each session, and I'm going to share this with you a little bit because you're not doing these sessions. These are the experiential groups. They will be running these sessions themselves. So you want to make sure that this agreement is modifiable. In other words, what happened in this group last session that we need to change or drop off of this agreement? Maybe there's something in there that it just doesn't seem necessary anymore. Or there's something we hadn't thought about because it happened in this last group. And so we're going to add that. And so you want to start out each session with, how do you guys feel about this agreement? And you have this agreement posted on the wall. And so everybody sees it. It's the agreement that they came to. Does anybody want to change something or add something? So that's really important. That's modifiable. The next one is you've got to somehow have on this agreement the idea of respectfulness. And some people interpret respect in different ways, and so you have to have a good conversation about that. And when I say they need to come up with these agreements, that doesn't mean that you can't interject every so often, but these are the things that I've found that you want to have within the agreement. Now, you can have agreements that have a lot more than this or a lot less than this, but you want to try to have these items, is my observation. Okay, the next one is about timeliness. So you want to be sure that they agree that they're going to be on time. They're going to start on time, that being timely is respectful of other people in the group, and that they're going to end on time because we're all busy people and we need to make sure that we end on time. And so that we're timely. Also, you wanted to have a discussion a little bit about that, about, do people occupy too much of the group? So you may want to decide how that happens. Should that person talk no more than 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, however, but you want to have these kinds of statements in the agreement on the wall so that they can see it. And the last one is really important, is subgrouping. You need to have a discussion about getting together outside of group. Let's say two people really hit it off and they say, hey, after group, hey, let's go down and we'll have a cup of coffee and we'll talk. Well, is that fair to the rest of the group members that you're continuing group after group is over? See, that's not really respectful. That's not really making people equal. And is that safe? And so you need to have these kind of conversations. And sometimes I've seen groups say, no, that's fine. It doesn't bother me none. And they agree to it. We can subgroup all we want. And then when they do subgroup, then we come back and talk about the next session. Well, how did that happen? How did people feel about that? Often what I see people say is, yeah, it's okay to go out after group, but we're not going to talk about other people. We're just going to talk about our own experience. And people seem to pretty much appreciate that and are cool with that. And we won't be bad mouthing other people in the group or anything like that. Because what you don't want to have happen is you haven't addressed this issue in the agreement, and then somebody, let's say a couple people, 2 or 3 people, go have coffee afterwards, and another person from the group happens to be in that same situation, same area, and they just kind of walk past and, oh, they're talking about the group. Are they talking about me? And so where does your safety go at that point? So, yeah, Karen, you said you're used to run an open group. So how would you handle this part of the group process? Yeah, this is basically a closed group. So this is a time-limited group that you'd want to do. And so open group would be quite different. And I found it's hard to not subgroup with open groups. It just doesn't seem to work as well. And people come and go. And it ends up, in my observation, most open groups end up being more psychoeducational and less psychotherapeutic. It's an imparting of information rather than developing bonds so that get deep personal processes taken care of. Does that kind of answer your question a little bit, Karen? Okay. Okay, so here's some observations you want to present to the group. As a leader, here's some ideas. So when these stages of group happen, you need to point them out. The forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning type of things. Forming is we're sitting around and we're just nice people. We're not really covering anything. We're just kind of socializing. Storming, then we start to find things about each other that kind of irritate each other. So then we norm. We kind of create our own group culture. Then we solve problems, the performing, get things done, and then adjourning, we've met our goals and we're moving on. So when this happens, you need to do this. Let me give you an example of a storming. I was in a group session and leading the group, and one of the group members spoke up and said, "Is this all we're going to do? Just sit around and just talk about things?" And so what that person was doing is they were challenging my authority. They were like, you're the boss here. Make us do something. And so whenever your authority is challenged like that, never take that personally, but put it back on the person and say to them, well, what do you want to do? I mean, what do you think would happen? What do you need to have happen so that we're doing more than what we're doing now? So that was a storming in the sense where a confrontation happens. Typically, storming happens during a confrontation. Somebody confronts somebody, and typically, my observation is they usually confront the group leader. And so you talk about these transitions. Did anybody notice in this group session that we got into the storming phase, then we got into and phase? And so talk about that, because there is a psychoeducational element to this, because these are professional development groups with professionals and or students. And so they need to be able to do this. So when they run groups, they can point it out. They can notice that, know what's happening. And then you also want to point out, who is influencing this group the most this session? Who are the followers in this group? And then here's an important one, and this goes back to that corrective recapitulation of family, is who reminds who of who, transference, countertransference. I had one guy in a group says, it's so nice to have you here, Dr. Wayman, because when you're running group, it's like dad is here, and everything's going to be okay and safe because you're here. Now that's a huge transference right there. Okay, so we needed to talk about that and help him understand his relationship with his father, because he was bringing that into the group, and then the group members got to discuss with him about his relationship there. So these are observations you want to present. These are things you say out loud to the groups, in the groups. Okay, so topics to cover. And what I do with these, I assign these topics ahead of time. And so I have 2 people out of each group cover this topic. There's I think 6 topics, if I remember correctly. And these are in an emotional order. They seem to get more intense as we go along. And so you want to have a group last, about an hour, preferably an hour and a half. And then you process that group outside of the group. But I'm not saying you go anywhere. You say, now this group is done. Now as professionals, you're leading groups on your own as professionals. What did you observe as a clinician about this group, and have them talk about the group as a professional? And so that's really important. Not only do they experience the group, but then they talk about the group as well, because we're trying to help them develop as professionals, mental health professionals, or students who are learning how to do counseling, group counseling. So the first topic is professional development. So we have them initiate a discussion about this topic, is about memberships, research. What does it look like when people are not being professional? What kind of things tell us that we are being professionals? So you have a discussion about that. That would be like the second session, maybe the third session, if you've already run the first 1 or 2. The next one would be talking about self-care. And this kind of goes along, it dovetails off that first one, about professional development. But self-care is, how do you take care of yourself in your professional life? And that's really important for people to know that, because often we get so busy, we don't take care of ourselves. We need to discuss about that. What does it look like when somebody does not take care of themselves? How do you think you're doing on your self-care? What kind of goals do you have for your life? And help them talk about this as a group. And so this topic is very important. Am I going too fast, or is this a good speed? We only have eight slides left, so I want to make sure covering. Okay. Thanks, Glenn. All right. Thanks, Ellie. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So the third group that you've assigned, so there's another 2 people that are running this group, is counseling theory. How did you come to your counseling theory? If you haven't come to your counseling theory yet, because it often takes people on average 10 years to find a counseling theory that fits them. 10 years of just regular, continual practice, and then they finally find a counseling theory that kind of fits them. This helps people to understand, how do you come to your counseling theory? So for myself, I came to Adlerian theory because it just kind of fit my worldview, because I believe this. I believe people are equal. I don't really care for hierarchies, and I like the idea of birth order. I came from a family of five. I was the youngest of a family of five. And so I could see how that his theory kind of fit my personality, and I could see it in my family and other people. And so, and then also your beliefs, your personal beliefs, your spiritual beliefs, your philosophical beliefs. How do those influence your theory? All those things are part of the topic to cover. So that's the next group there. Now another group. Now you're starting to heat up a little bit, and we want that to happen. We want them to become where there is clashing, where there is a little bit of, we're not such a nice mamby-pamby group sitting around talking about these concepts. We're now really starting to confront each other. Okay? And so, but the way you get about it with this in professional development group is, how do you work with a client who has values that are different than yours? You know, how do you understand your biases? How do you understand, some of the microaggressions that you do? Has anybody else picked up on maybe some of the microaggressions with each other here? What are some conflicts that you've had in the past? How do you resolve conflicts? These type of ideas. And so here we're getting to the idea of how do you help people who have different understandings of the world than you do? And this is where things start to get warm, start get heated. They start confronting each other, and what you got to do if you're a group leader is don't be afraid of the clash. Allow anger to happen, allow things to happen. Just remind them of the guidelines that they've agreed to. Can we confront each other about things that kind of rub us wrong about each other? And then can we make our own group culture at that point? So this type of stuff happens, and often this will happen. You need to point out when this starts happening here, you really don't have a problem with that person that's sitting next to you. That person that's sitting next to you reminds you of an experience you've had in the past, and that's unresolved. Let's resolve it here, this person here in this group, and you will find how you can resolve it with that person outside of this group that you've had this conflict with. Because Adlerian theory, Freudian theory, he had id, ego, and superego. He said that you have conflicts internally. You have conflicts with yourself. Your id, ego, superego are in conflict with each other. But Adlerian theory says, no, our conflicts are horizontal. Our conflicts are not within ourselves. Our conflicts are excuse me, hang on. Our conflicts are with each other. And we resolve our conflicts, we'll have a better society. Yeah, Gwen. So people run from the clash. They really do. I like what you said. Not to be afraid of the clash, unresolved situations. Don't run from it. When it happens, as a group leader, don't run from it. Push it. Let it happen. And sometimes that's when we need to really be quiet as group leaders and just kind of observe and just make comments every so often. Now, the next one that you want them to do, you can see each one we're getting a little bit hotter here, a little bit more involved, is countertransference then. Helping them to see countertransference that's going on in their lives. And they have countertransference going on in this group. They need to see this group. And I often give an example from my own professional life about countertransference that sometimes helps them to see it, because Adlerians don't necessarily believe countertransference is bad. We believe countertransference is just increased sociability. It's an increased connection with a person. It can be bad, but it isn't always bad. And so I give an example from my personal professional life. I was at a crisis unit. An older woman was brought in by her daughter because the daughter said that her mother was suicidal. And so the daughter's in the waiting room. I'm in talking to the older woman. And within just a few minutes, we're kind of yucking it up and joking. And I'm like, this woman isn't suicidal. I mean, what's the deal here? But I still do my assessment, get through that. And then I get back to writing up my assessment. I haven't made a decision about if she should be hospitalized yet or not. And it hits me. It's like, ah, that woman is like my grandmother. And I love my grandmother so much. And it's just like, we just hit it off so well. And so then I talked to my colleagues, hey, I'm experiencing countertransference with this person. Am I missing something here? So we went over my evaluation, and we determined no, it was okay. But if I hadn't caught that and she really was suicidal, she would have gone home and be dead the next morning. And here I would have totally missed it. And so I would have done a disservice. So countertransference can get in the way, but also you need to recognize it when it happens. So by recognizing countertransference in a professional development group, then they learn to recognize that with their clients. So Karen, you've said that you've had groups talk about clashes in their lives, and you said it's been mostly cathartic, but you allow for behavioral practice and role play. Oh yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, if you can get them to role play in the group, and especially when you get countertransference, like I could role play a person being my grandmother, and I would relate to this person as my grandmother, and see how maybe that may play out in some of my evaluations with some of my clients, and how that could be detrimental, you know. But they do really resist it. They do. I can see that. And so what I often do is I model that myself, and I show it's okay. It doesn't have to be picture perfect. I'm imperfect. It's all right. Things we'll get through this together because everybody here loves everybody. We're okay. And so does that kind of help a little bit? I mean, how do you handle it? Oh, you said thank you. Okay. All right. So countertransference. Now the next one seems to be the hottest issue when we come up to it. And it's multicultural awareness. Yalom says, and this is almost an axiom for Yalom, he says that if you don't confront multicultural issues in counseling, you're not going to have good group counseling sessions. He says you have to confront multicultural issues. It's almost an axiom in group counseling, in his opinion. And so you have to do that. So how do you work with clients who have different cultural practices than you? Now, what is the most challenging for you with your clients? And so, and then you need to maybe provide examples where people lack cultural awareness, and how did that happen? What did that do to the relationship? So what we're doing is we're doing this in a backwards way. We're not having them directly confront their own multicultural awareness with each other. We're saying, with your clients, how does this happen? And then it ends up being between them. But we approach it about their clients. So we don't obviously want them to betray any confidence of any of their clients. So they need to speak in generalities. But in this instance, we talk about, how do you handle this? And this almost always, invariably, in my experience, has been the most heated time here. They're talking about multicultural awareness. And Adlerians have an interesting statement about multicultural. They believe that each person is their own culture. So what do we have? We have like 7.5 billion people on the planet. So Adlerians believe there's 7.5 billion cultures going on this planet. So anytime two people talk, even in counseling or outside of counseling, no matter how seemingly similar they are, there is a multicultural, a cross-cultural experience happening. And so we need to learn that our perspective is not the only perspective, and that we need to be more accepting and accommodating of other perspectives. And so this is just, I really like it when we get to this one here. And I do this randomly. I don't select two people. I don't. We pulled out a hat. You're doing this group with this person. You're doing this group with this person, and I've seen it. It doesn't matter if the race, the ethnicity of the leaders for this. It always works really well, and they end up confronting this issue. So I don't do any matching of any sort because you can't match. It's just impossible. Okay, the next one, legal and ethical. And oftentimes they come up with a good ethical dilemma, and we talk about that and spend a good amount of time on that. ACA has all kinds of ethical dilemmas. that you can use that are really helpful. And and this also kind of helps them. What do you do when you have an ethical dilemma? You're not a lone ranger here. You need to consult. You need to talk to each other. And so this helps them to see that a lot of the ethical dilemmas that they have are not unique to them. So that brings along that universality. So now we're kind of slowing down a little bit. We've culminated there with multicultural awareness. Now we're kind of backing off and kind of cooling off a little bit, but we're now getting into more information imparting at that point. And then the last one, the second to the last one, is crisis intervention. How do you handle counseling? How do you handle crisis during counseling? What do you do with suicidal people? And they get to respond to each other about how they handle this. And then the last one then is the termination group. And so this is the one that you want to be in control of. This is the last group, and you help them consolidate their experiences. What I tell them, though, is, I don't know if you guys know this, but I've been running this group the whole time. I know you guys have been in charge of these groups. You've had practice now running the group, but actually I've given you an example of how to run a group. So we've just run this group for 8, 10 sessions, whatever. And actually I've been running this group the whole time, and it's been about your professional development, about getting you to be where you need to be, where you know yourself, so that you can help your clients. And sometimes I see a light bulb come on, they're like, oh, really? So you've really been doing it. So that's how you do it. And it helps them to kind of pull that together. And there's a bunch of different consolidation experiences, termination experiences you can do. One that I like to do, and this is a little bit risky, so you have to make sure that you kind of understand your group before you do this, but I have them each write their name at the top of a sheet of paper, pass it to the left, and then you write 1 or 2 words about that person, and you keep going around till it comes all the way around back to the person, and then they get that, and then they discuss that. Oh, this is what people are saying about me in this group. This is how they observe me. You can do that earlier too. That's not a problem, but I tend to save that for the termination group. And the only difficulty is sometimes people write bad stuff, and so you want to be part of that process. So it'll come across you, and you can see, oh, somebody wrote something bad about this person. You need to note that, and so that you can follow up on that. And so I really enjoy doing that. I think it's really good if it's positive, Gwen. It is a good idea, and 99% of the time it has been positive when I've done this. But you don't assume it's going to be positive all the time, because there are times people wait till the last second to tell people how they really feel about them, and we don't want them to do that. But people sometimes do that, and also in the termination group, you need to talk to them about how are you feeling right now that this group is ending, and the way you're feeling right now is characteristic of how you've ended other important relationships in your life. Okay, so sometimes your clients may not show up. This is what you tell them. Sometimes your clients may not show up for the last group because that's the way they ended relationships. They just drop out of a relationship, never show up again, never talk to the person again. Or maybe some of your clients will be mad and they have to leave a relationship angry, And so pay attention to how you're feeling right now about terminating this group. This is how your clients will be feeling when they terminate group with you, and sometimes how they feel when they terminate individual sessions with you. So you need to help them to understand that's really important. So good. I'm glad, Ellie and Gwen, I'm glad you're liking some of these ideas. So I've got resources on the next page here. My favorite one is the one by Sonstegard and Bitter, Adlerian Group Counseling and Therapy. It's a little bit older. I wish they would redo that one. And then also Yalom's is a little bit older too. I'd like to see him redo it. He's already in the 5th edition of that one. Those are my go-to in these regards, but also Sweeney, and I've just been reading Berg just recently because I'm using it in one of my courses, my group counseling courses, and Berg is really good. It has some really good ideas there, and it's a lot newer. So that might, some of those resources might be helpful for you. You can also go into the Journal of Individual Psychology, which is the journal for the North American Society of Adlerian Psychology, and they have a lot on group counseling there that you can use if you can go into some of the research there. Any comments? We're about done here. We got just a couple minutes. Any comments or questions that are still kind of lingering? Thank you, Gwen. Appreciate the compliment. All right. Yes, the ICA conference. Thank you so much. You stole my thunder because I was going to say that before we left. No problem. It's June 7th. We want you to be there. Come along June 7th. You can get up to 7 CEUs for that. If you're a member, it's cheaper than if you aren't a member. So if you're not a member, please become a member because it'll be cheaper in the long run to do that. And it is in Fort Wayne, downtown Fort Wayne. Next year, 2020, we're going to have it at the University of Indianapolis. And our slogan for the 2020 conference is 2020 Vision. That's what we are as counselors. We've got 2020 Vision. But our slogan for this year, for 2019, is hashtag Counselor Strong. We want to show that we know what we're doing. We counselors do. Also, our special speaker this year is the head of the Behavioral Health Sciences Board, Licensing Board, excuse me, Dr. Don Osborne. He's going to update us on the law changes. There's been a lot of positive movement in the law here in Indiana, and he's going to update us on that. There's been some really good movement for counselors. This is becoming a much more counselor-friendly state, and so it's getting much better. And so you'll get to hear from him about how things are changing. Good. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, I'll be sending out CEUs, this PowerPoint as well, and also be sending the recording. It may take me a few days because I have to convert the recording, upload it to YouTube, and then get it on our page. But I'll send it to you personally, Ellie, Gwen, Karen, and Tom. And
All right, thanks.
And you guys will have that. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And I'm going to end the recording now. And I'll see you guys next time. Right at present, we don't have a webinar for next month. We've got one in the works. Oh, we do have one that works for May. I haven't put it up yet. And we have one that works for July, but we don't have one for June yet. But I plan to be putting those up soon. The one in May, I think, is going to be on telemental health issues, ethics and issues. And the one in July is going to be on, if I remember correctly, it's going to be on choice theory. And so really good stuff. All right. Thank you so much for coming, and you all have a really good day. Bye.
Thanks.
Bet.